Throughout his life, the Queen, his beloved mother, had been a guiding force and a personal example for him. But what happened next didn't unfold during a grand speech or a press conference. There were no cameras, no reporters, no dramatic headlines. It happened behind closed doors, where the truest version of royalty is rarely seen. It was a private conversation between King Charles III and one of his most trusted advisors. They were discussing routine matters, media strategy, public appearances, and the growing generational gap within the monarchy. But then the discussion took a turn. The mood shifted to more personal territory. Rising family tensions, Diana's lingering presence, and the quiet shift in influence happening right under Charles's nose. That's when it happened. She wrecked everything. I despised her. Just 7 words, quiet, bitter, and heavy with years of regret, frustration, and restrained anger. And someone heard them. A short audio clip, just over 15 seconds, made its way online, leaked by an unknown source. There was no context, no official confirmation. But the voice was unmistakable. It was Charles. The public reaction was swift and explosive. Who was he talking about? Camilla, the woman he spent decades defending? Diana, the wife he could never fully connect with, but who never left the public's heart? Or could it be someone else, someone newer? Kate, whose rising popularity and poised presence have drawn comparisons to Diana, and who might be awakening something Charles thought long buried. The palace rushed to take control of the narrative, but this time, the usual spin wasn't enough. Carefully crafted statements couldn't undo the damage. The media dissected every syllable. Morning shows brought on body language experts and psychologists to interpret his tone. Former staff members came forward with exclusive insights and strategic commentary. And still the question remained. Who was he really talking about, and why now? For many in the public, especially those who never forgave how Diana was treated, no explanation was needed. They believed they already knew the truth. This wasn't just a slip-up or a momentary lapse. It felt like a rupture. Because despite King Charles's polished image and his efforts to present himself as a modern monarch, those 7 words exposed something raw, something deeply human. A man still carrying resentment long after the cameras stopped rolling. Now, with the royal family scrambling to keep things steady, as Kate's popularity continues to rise, and William quietly reshapes his own approach to the crown, one question lingers. Who does Charles truly despise? And maybe more importantly, what does that reveal about the institution he was born to uphold? But before we continue, we'd love for you to hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this video. If you just did, we truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the main content. From his earliest days, Charles Philip Arthur George was taught how to speak, how to carry himself, and what emotions to suppress. Born into a world defined by decorum and restraint, he didn't grow up like most children. While other boys were chasing soccer balls and collecting bruises, Charles was learning how to wave just right, how to keep a stiff upper lip. There was no space in the monarchy for softness or vulnerability. To be king meant staying distant, composed, and, above all, silent. That silence became his shield. As a child, Charles was known for being sensitive and reserved. Those who cared for him often described him as thoughtful, maybe even a bit lonely. His father, Prince Philip, reportedly found him too gentle. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II, maintained a cool, emotional distance both publicly and privately. Warmth was rare, encouragement even rarer. So Charles adapted. He tucked his feelings away. He smiled when expected, stood tall, and repeated the words written for him. But beneath the surface he carried a quiet storm. Hurt, anger, and confusion he never dared express in the palace halls. He didn't rebel against the role he was born into. He simply got better at playing it. By the time he reached his 30s, Charles had become fluent in the art of royal survival. Endless pleasantries, polished manners, and the careful habit of speaking volumes without revealing much. But underneath all of that was a man deeply conflicted, shaped not for peace, but for power. Then came Diana. Their marriage was never grounded in deep romantic connection. In many ways, it was a union born out of tradition and public expectation. Diana, young and full of hope, believed in fairy tales. Charles, older and already emotionally tied to Camilla Parker Bowles, believed in duty. Once again, his response was silence. While Diana publicly pleaded for affection, compassion, and honesty, Charles kept his composure. He ignored the tabloids. He offered no personal defense as public opinion turned her into a beloved icon and painted him as the villain. He simply pressed forward, because that's what he had been conditioned to do. But beneath the calm exterior, the silence wasn't strength. It was suppression. Charles was seething. Every glowing headline about Diana felt like a personal blow. Every crowd that adored her was a reminder of the connection he never managed to create. The more celebrated she became, the more diminished he felt within the very institution that was supposed to elevate him. He turned to Camilla not just for affection, but for refuge. She didn't ask him to open up in ways he couldn't. She understood the burden, the expectations, the mask he wore. But even she couldn't silence the echo of Diana's voice. And when Diana's life was cut short, suddenly, tragically, the silence cracked. The public's grief was immense. The country wept. But they didn't look to Charles for comfort. They looked to him for answers. In that moment, he became a symbol, not of guidance, but of what the monarchy had long failed to provide: empathy, authenticity, and emotional truth. Still, he remained quiet. Years passed. His role changed. He married Camilla. He waited patiently for his time to lead. He worked on reshaping his image, championed environmental causes, and stepped into a more global diplomatic role. Yet the emotional core of the man beneath the crown stayed buried, untouched, unresolved. Because a life spent holding everything in doesn't teach you how to finally let it out. Now, as the monarchy begins to reshape itself around a new generation, William leading with empathy, and Kate gracefully carrying forward Diana's legacy, Charles finds himself at the center of a storm he never intended, but may have long fueled. He never truly learned how to express what he felt. But now, the truth has slipped out, raw, unfiltered, and impossible to take back. I despise her. 7 words, not scripted, not edited, just spoken, exposing the man behind decades of restraint. A man who tried to manage what was never meant to be contained: emotion. Through it all, King Charles III appeared to wear the crown with ease, or at least with skill. Even through relentless public pressure, the loss of his mother, and the long-awaited transition from prince to king, he remained a symbol of composure. Perhaps not adored, not idolized, but steady. Until that steadiness cracked. It happened in a private room, out of sight, away from the public eye. According to a senior advisor who later confirmed the moment under anonymity, the conversation had started like so many others within the palace walls. Formal, measured, layered in royal protocol. Charles had called a closed-door meeting with 2 top advisors. The topic? Kate Middleton's rising influence. She hadn't broken any rules. She wasn't confrontational. But she was everywhere. Her recent solo appearances, unplanned, heartfelt, and undeniably authentic, had won over the public. Her foundation, inspired by Diana's legacy, was drawing headlines. And inside the palace, whispers were turning into conversations. Kate wasn't just well-liked. She was becoming a force. Charles noticed it. He saw how cameras shifted toward her, even when he was standing beside her. He heard international leaders asking to meet with William and Kate, instead of with him and Camilla. And perhaps most painfully, he felt Diana's presence creeping closer with every step Catherine took. That day, the pressure finally gave way. As the advisors reviewed the schedule of upcoming public engagements, Charles abruptly cut in, waving his hand with frustration. "She's changing everything," he muttered. "Changing the whole damn story." There was a beat of silence. Then came the words. "She wrecked everything. I despised her." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. But those few words carried the weight of a man who had spent a lifetime battling a narrative he could never quite escape. A man who had loved Camilla in secret, lost Diana in heartbreak, and now saw the world embracing a daughter-in-law who seemed to embody everything people had once hoped Diana would become. The aide who later leaked the exchange recalled, "It wasn't anger, it was sorrow hardened into resentment." He wasn't just speaking about one person. He was speaking about everything he had lost, the moments, the affection, the connection he never had. Still, the 7 words made it past the palace walls. Within days, the audio surfaced online. It remains unclear whether the leak was accidental or intentional, but either way, the world heard it. Charles never clarified who he meant. No name followed the statement. No official comment came after. Only the familiar royal silence. The same strategy that had weathered so many past storms. But this time it didn't work. Because this wasn't just gossip or tabloid fodder, this felt like a revelation. A deeply personal moment from a king who could no longer hold it all in. A man who had been trained for composure, for calm, for duty, but who, beneath the polished exterior, had been quietly unraveling for years. A father watching the public's affection drift toward his son, and the legacy of a woman he could never truly match. It wasn't rage. It was a moment of collapse, one that no crown could shield him from. He was never meant to speak his truth out loud. But when King Charles uttered the now infamous words, "She destroyed everything. I despise her," the world erupted in speculation. Who was he talking about? The media rushed to connect the dots, tossing out names like Meghan Markle, and even, in more extreme theories, Queen Elizabeth herself. But one name surfaced again and again, steadily, insistently. Camilla. To many, it seemed impossible. After all, Charles had spent years defending her place at his side. He weathered public backlash, challenged centuries of tradition, and ultimately placed her next to him on the throne. Camilla, once scorned as the other woman, now stood as queen consort, crowned, adorned in jewels, a symbol of resilience. But what the public didn't see was the emotional debris that never fully disappeared. Palace insiders suggest that the tension between Charles and Camilla has been simmering, not through shouting matches or broken glass, but through long silences, quiet standoffs, and unspoken resentment. Outwardly, Camilla maintained her role with practiced grace. But behind palace doors, she's known to be sharp-tongued, strong-willed, and increasingly dismissive of the emotional weight Diana's legacy still carries. That quiet rivalry, Camilla versus the memory of Diana, has haunted their marriage from the start. And Charles? He's been caught in the middle, publicly loyal, privately torn. Despite all his efforts to reframe Camilla's image, she was never embraced the way Diana was, nor the way Kate is now. And over time, what Charles once felt so fiercely for Camilla seems to have curdled into frustration, regret, even resentment. Because she has come to represent more than a partner. She's a constant reminder of a version of his life, and himself, that he can't seem to escape. According to those close to the palace, that bitterness eventually turned inward. Some sources claim Camilla has grown more assertive in royal affairs, allegedly attempting to curtail Kate's public exposure as her popularity continues to soar. Her reaction to the Diana-focused foundation, championed by Kate, was said to be one of anger, not because of its message, but because of what it symbolized. "She's trying to become the next Diana," Camilla was overheard saying to a palace aide, "and no one's stopping her." Meanwhile, Charles, already feeling sidelined by the attention drawn to William and Kate, reportedly began to crack under the strain. His once unwavering devotion to Camilla had started to unravel, subtly at first, then more noticeably, as public favor steadily shifted toward the younger royals. And then, during that now infamous meeting with his advisors, overwhelmed, exhausted, and quietly resentful, he said it. "She wrecked everything. I despised her." It wasn't just anger. It was the voice of regret. He regretted that the love he once shared with Camilla, once fierce and defiant, had morphed into something more about endurance than affection. He regretted that, in fighting so hard to secure her place within the monarchy, he had lost something more valuable, the hearts of his people. And perhaps, most painful of all, he regretted knowing that no matter how high Camilla climbed, she would never become the queen the world had wanted. That crown, in spirit, seemed to belong to someone else, not to Camilla, but to Kate, and that realization stung. Years have passed since the crowds filled Kensington Palace with flowers and tears. The nation's mourning faded, the tributes cleared, her name gradually erased from official records and royal ceremonies. But Diana never truly disappeared. Her memory endures, not in statues or commemorative trinkets, but in something far more permanent: the people's hearts, the gaze of her sons, and in the quiet judgment that has always followed Charles. It lingers in the national conscience, a story unresolved. Charles has spent much of his life trying to manage her legacy. He rarely says her name publicly, and when he does, it's measured, cordial, controlled, emotionally distant. In front of the cameras, she is reduced to a historical figure, a chapter in royal history. But behind closed doors, those who know him say her memory holds far more power, and it cuts much deeper. Because Diana didn't just leave a wound, she left a mirror, one that reflects not just sorrow, but a sense of moral reckoning. Every time Charles steps into the spotlight, he feels it. The unspoken comparisons, the glances that quietly say, "It should have been her." Even now, wearing the crown, he has never felt the love she inspired so effortlessly. And with Kate Middleton's rising star, her warmth, her poise, her instinct for connection, those comparisons have returned with new intensity. With every smile, every heartfelt gesture, the past reemerges. And as he scans the morning paper, the headline stings. He hears it in the applause when Kate visits a children's hospital or speaks passionately about mental health, issues Diana once championed with little support. And perhaps most piercing of all, he hears it in William's voice, his eldest son, who once walked silently behind his mother's coffin, now stands proudly behind his wife, admiring her sincerity, compassion, and quiet strength. Charles has never publicly criticized his son's choices, but according to those close to the palace, he increasingly feels pushed aside, not just as monarch, but as a father watching his own vision of royalty being quietly rewritten. Diana's legacy continues to haunt him, not simply because of what her absence represents, but because her presence never truly faded. No matter how much he builds, her memory casts a long and unrelenting shadow. Camilla was supposed to mark a new chapter, a hopeful one, proof that love could endure and triumph. But she's not adored, she's tolerated. And that small but significant difference is a constant reminder for Charles that the public has never truly let go of Diana. Maybe neither has he. "She destroyed everything," he said once. But maybe what he really meant was, she never truly left. Not from the family, not from the institution, not from his conscience. Because now her story has found new voices, passed down to William, carried forward by Kate. and embraced by a public that still speaks her name with reverence. For Charles, his legacy has become a mirror, reflecting not only what was lost, but what still lingers. The monarchy he tried to define now feels like it's slipping away, not in chaos, but in quiet resistance. William and Kate haven't raised their voices. They haven't issued bold declarations or targeted criticisms, but their actions speak louder than any headline. Without saying a word, they've created their own kind of rebellion. From the outside, the Prince and Princess of Wales seem to follow tradition, attending state functions, wearing the right smiles, saying the right words. But beneath that polished exterior, something deeper is unfolding. A thoughtful, measured reimagining of what royal life should look like. And it's happening beyond Charles's influence. Insiders say he's grown increasingly uneasy with the couple's autonomy. Where he expects structure and seniority, William emphasizes collaboration. Where the palace clings to media strategy, Kate leads with presence and purpose. Their priority isn't lineage or ceremony, it's people. And now, as the tide shifts around them, Charles and Camilla find themselves standing on ground that feels less like a throne, and more like the remains of a kingdom they no longer recognize. It didn't begin with a clash or dramatic showdown. It started quietly, with Kate showing up where others didn't. Children's hospices, women's shelters, mental health clinics, places that had long existed outside the traditional reach of the monarchy. Her visits weren't about headlines. They weren't grand gestures. They were quiet messages. We see you. We're here with you. And the response wasn't cheers. It was trust. The same kind Diana once inspired. Now that trust belongs to Kate, and Charles noticed. So did Camilla. In the months after Kate launched the Diana Initiative, a deeply personal project honoring her late mother-in-law, the mood behind palace walls shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. This wasn't just about popularity. Kate had become something more. She represented moral leadership, a sense of purpose that resonated beyond titles or ceremony. And although Charles holds the title of king, he no longer holds that role in the eyes of many. William, while never directly challenging his father, has made his position clear through action rather than words. After the leaked audio of Charles's painful confession, he reportedly began declining joint appearances with his father and stepmother. He even skipped a previously scheduled event under Camilla's patronage to accompany Kate on an unannounced visit to a children's palliative care center. Those close to William say his loyalty is unwavering toward his mother and toward his wife. One lost to history, the other facing it head-on. Kate's quiet rise hasn't simply echoed Diana's legacy, it has extended it. The same honesty, the same emotional intelligence, the same refusal to be a silent symbol. And in doing so, Kate has created something Camilla never quite could. A royal presence people actually believe in. Charles may sit on the throne, but it's William and Kate who are shaping what comes next. Without saying it outright, their message is clear. They will not allow the past to repeat itself. No more hiding behind silence. No more pretending for the sake of appearances. No more surrendering truth to tradition. This is a new kind of monarchy, one defined not just by lineage, but by character. And in honoring Diana, not just through tribute, but through action, William and Kate have done something quietly revolutionary. They've stepped away from the rules of the crown and started telling a different story on their own terms. In the end, it wasn't a scandal that unraveled King Charles. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't even the lingering shadow of Diana. It was 7 words, spoken in a moment of exhaustion, layered with years of pain and suppressed resentment, that shattered the carefully maintained image he had spent a lifetime building. She wrecked everything. I despised her. Whether those words were aimed at Camilla, Diana, or even Kate, they spoke to something far deeper than a personal conflict. They exposed the emotional erosion hidden beneath the crown, the price of a life spent wrapped in restraint, shaped by image, and silenced by duty. Charles waited his entire life for this role, and now that he has it, he seems more isolated than ever. He sits on the throne, yet his influence over the public narrative feels limited. He wears the crown, but it's William and Kate who have captured the hearts and attention of a new generation. The monarchy continues on his shoulders, but its future belongs to their hands. Kate's warmth, William's steady presence. Together, they represent something the institution has long lacked: authenticity. And that is the real tragedy. Because Charles gained more than the crown. He inherited its burden. The weight of tradition without connection. The title without true peace. A role shaped by expectation rather than understanding. He sought comfort in Camilla. He tried to hold it together with silence, but in the end, what brought him to this moment wasn't politics or protocol. It was emotion, Diana's, Kate's, and finally, his own. Those 7 words were never meant to be public, but maybe they needed to be. Not to condemn a king, not to stir scandal, but to reveal what it truly costs to live behind the facade. Because behind every royal gesture, every pressed suit, every polished statement, there's still a person, and even kings can break. As Charles retreats deeper into formality, William and Kate quietly lead a different kind of monarchy, one rooted in connection, not control, one that honors the past without being trapped by it, and that, more than any act of rebellion, is what threatens the old way. Not a revolution, but a reckoning. Because power might place a crown on your head, but only truth earns the people's trust. And sometimes that's the most terrifying truth a king will ever face.